Well, welcome everybody. Sorry for this bit of a mucked up start today. Normally we would start the meeting with a few announcements, a bit of show and tell, and some media news. But of course, we're having problems with our presenter getting her Zoom working. We'll kick off straight with her. So Fran Zilio from the South Australian Museum has done a lot of work in with her and a colleague documenting Arthur Conan Doyle's 10-day visit to Adelaide as part of his Spiritualism tour in 1920. Fran and her colleague did all the research, put all the photos together, and then curated an exhibition at the museum, which I believe was very well received. So without further ado, we'll just turn over to Fran now, and she can take us through her presentation, and we can learn all about Arthur Conan Doyle, the champion of spiritualism, and his tour to Adelaide in 1920. Thank you, Fran, all yours.
Okay, thank you so much for your patience. And just a disclaimer, it's been quite a while since I've looked at this. And anyway, I'll get started. And I also explained to Bill that we actually lost the internet this morning as well. So it's just been one of those technical type days. Okay, so as Bill, and thank you for your introduction, as Bill mentioned, I work at the South Australian Museum. And one of my most favourite things about working at the South Australian Museum is seeing how our collections have inspired not just academic researchers, but creative artists as well, and specifically how fact inspires fictions. But I'll talk a bit more about that later on. So how did this all begin? One day, a colleague, Jenny, and I became interested in Sir Arthur Ignatius Conan Doyle. I'll just get to that slide. After reading about his visit to the South Australian Museum in Herbert Hale's History of the Museum from 1856 to 1956. Now, Herbert Hale was the director at the museum from 1931 to 1960. Now, apart from Conan Doyle as creator of Sherlock Holmes, we knew very little about him, I'm ashamed to say, to people who are either Doyleans and or Sherlockian people. However, we assumed that a visit by a celebrated author would not have gone unnoticed. So the archival research began. So we began by applying Sherlock's sleuthing methods to unveil the veil of mystery surrounding Conan Doyle's little-known visit to the museum in September of 1920. So if you just bear with me, because we asked the question, first of all, we asked who was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle? So known best as the creator of Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was a man of diverse abilities and interests. He was a physician, inventor, sportsman, advocate for criminal and social justice, war correspondent and historian. But perhaps lesser known was his dedication to promote spiritualism. He took the message to the United States, Canada, Europe, Africa, New Zealand and Australia. Now, Arthur Ignatius Conan Doyle was born in Edinburgh on the 22nd of May, 1859, to Charles Altamont Doyle and Mary Foley. He was the third child in a family of 9 children. Now, Conan Doyle's father was the son of John Doyle, a devout Irish Catholic and a renowned political caricaturist under the pseudonym H.B. Charles Doyle was a civil servant with the Scottish Office of Works in Edinburgh, earning a salary of £240 per annum. He tried to supplement his income with the sale of his drawings and watercolours, but made little money as he tended to give them away instead. Now, Charles was pensioned off in his 40s due to dipsomania. He spent time in sanatoria and asylums, but was institutionalised permanently when he developed epilepsy and dementia. Mary managed the household, but struggled to rear and educate a large family on her husband's meagre earnings. Now, 3 of Conan Doyle's sisters worked as governesses in Portugal. They would send their earnings home to help raise and educate their siblings. Oops. There he is. Now, Conan Doyle was first educated by the Jesuits at Stonyhurst. His school fees would have been remitted if he had dedicated himself to the Catholic Church. But despite the family's financial constraints, Mary Doyle, who was questioning her faith, refused. She later converted to the Anglican Church, while Conan Doyle's father remained a dedicated Catholic. In his books Memories and Adventures, Conan Doyle reflected on his spiritual unfolding. He questioned the Jesuits' theology and intolerance towards other religions. In the Catholic Church, to doubt anything is to doubt everything, and to doubt is a mortal sin. Conan Doyle advocated that the foundation of all Christian faith, not only Roman Catholicism, was so weak that his mind could not build upon them. He renounced Catholicism and became an agnostic Unitarian. So after leaving school, Conan Doyle trained as a physician and surgeon at the University of Edinburgh. And later we'll find out about some of those connections that he made when he visited Adelaide. He later studied ophthalmology in Vienna. During his medical studies, Conan Doyle was a materialist. He believed possessions and financial rewards were more important than spiritual belief. He later conceded that that was wrong. An interesting note is that 2 of Conan Doyle's teachers, Dr. Joseph Bell and Professor William Rutherford, were inspirations for his characters, Sherlock Holmes and Professor George Edward Challenger, respectively. But I'll also talk a bit more about Challenger further on in the talk. In 1882, Conan Doyle, aided by his brother Innes, established his own practice at Southsea as Dr. Conan Doyle, physician and surgeon. Through his practice, Conan Doyle met Louisa Hawkins, who he married in 1885 and had 2 children, Mary and Kingsley. Now, 1 year after his marriage, Conan Doyle accepted an invitation to a seance by a pioneer of psychic knowledge, Major General Alfred Drayson. Conan Doyle published his observations in the form of a letter entitled A Test Message in Light, a psychic newspaper. This would be the first of many. Later, he reflected that as a man of science, he required proof. At this time, he was inquisitive but skeptical. In 1893, Conan Doyle's wife, Louisa, was diagnosed with consumption. He managed to prolong her life for over a decade. Now, whilst visiting London in 1898, Conan Doyle met and fell in love with Jean Elizabeth Lecky. Though he cared for Louisa, he longed to marry Jean. In 1907, 1 year after Louisa's death, Conan Doyle and Jean were married and had 3 children. Conan Doyle participated in 3 wars, first as a war correspondent, where he witnessed the outbreak of the Sudanese War in 1896, and then as a medic in the Second Anglo-Boer War, 1899 to 1902. During the Second Anglo-Boer War, Conan Doyle advocated on behalf of the British forces when their conduct towards the Boers was called into question by the press. He was determined to disprove what he believed to be false and slanderous attacks. In 1902, Conan Doyle published a 60,000-word pamphlet entitled The War in South Africa, Its Causes and Conduct. He had it translated into many languages, distributing close to 440,000 copies throughout Europe, Russia, Canada, and the United States. The pamphlets were so successful at gaining public support that Conan Doyle received a knighthood. At the outbreak of First World War in 1914, Conan Doyle tried to enlist, but at the age of 55, he was declared medically unfit for service. This did not dissuade him from contributing to wartime activities. He established the Crowborough Company of the 6th Royal Sussex Volunteer Regiment and published widely. In 1916, Conan Doyle was engaged as a war correspondent for the British Foreign Office on behalf of the Italian government. He used this opportunity to not only visit the Italians, but also the British and French soldiers on the front line in France. Some spiritualists date modern spiritualism to 1848, when the Fox sisters of Hydesville, New York, created a sensation when they professed they could communicate with the spirit world through rapping noises. In Britain, the movement gave momentum during the First World War due to the unprecedented loss of life. Through mediums, it was believed spiritualism offered a means for dead loved ones to communicate with their families. This brought great comfort to the bereaved. Like many others, Conan Doyle suffered the tragic loss of family and friends, including his brother Innes. On the 25th of October 1917, Conan Doyle publicly announced his conversion to spiritualism at a London Spiritualist Alliance meeting. 3 days later, during a lecture tour of Britain, Conan Doyle received news from his daughter Mary that Kingsley, his son, was on his deathbed. Now, Kingsley had been wounded on the Somme in France and later succumbed to pneumonia. Conan Doyle's belief in the continuation of life after death as a spiritual etheric body was so strong that he continued with the tour. After Kingsley's death, Conan Doyle believed that his son communicated with him through the medium Evan Powell. During the seance, Kingsley asked for forgiveness. He had not shared his father's belief in spiritualism. By 1925, Conan Doyle was so committed to spiritualism that he opened the Psychic Bookshop Library Museum in London, which was managed by his daughter Mary. Leading up to his conversion, Conan Doyle tried to reconcile religion with science. It is likely that the debates about evolution and creation influenced his thinking. Conan Doyle believed that the original teachings of Jesus Christ were lost by the church, that Christ's miracles were the result of psychic powers, and that the apostles Peter and Paul were trance mediums. Conan Doyle stated that God was not anthropomorphic, but an intelligence force behind all operations of nature. During seances, Conan Doyle believed that he had smelt ectoplasm, observed spirits walking through the room, seen heavy articles floating through the air, and had received information through mediums that no one else could have known. Conan Doyle argued that he tested all these occurrences scientifically and declared them genuine. He remained a spiritualist, despite criticism from skeptics and friends such as Harry Houdini. During a seance, Houdini's recently departed mother supposedly communicated with him through Lady Conan Doyle, who acted as the medium. This upset Houdini greatly. He reasoned that the verbal and written messages delivered through automatic writing could not be possible, as his mother was Jewish and understood little English. After the seance, Conan Doyle publicly proclaimed that Houdini believed in spiritualism. Houdini retaliated by declaring spiritualism a sham and mediums fraudulent. A feud developed, the friendship ended. We then asked ourselves, so why did Conan Doyle come to Australia? In September 1918, Conan Doyle had been invited by the Australian government to visit their troops in France. Accompanied by Sir Joseph Cook, who was the naval minister of the Australian government at the time, Conan Doyle witnessed Australian soldiers, along with Allied forces, break through the Hindenburg Line. The breach of the Hindenburg Line marked the fall of the last German defensive on the Western Front. Armistice was declared soon after. He writes in Wanderings of a Spiritualist, "I had spent some never-to-be-forgotten days with the Australian troops at the very crisis of the war. My heart was much with them. They fought so splendidly and lost so heavily." So later, when the invitation came from the Australian spiritualists to visit Australia, he could not resist. Conan Doyle was convinced that he had had prophetic dreams, including the outbreak of the First World War and many of its defining events. In February of 1920, he writes to his mother, "The call to Australia is very insistent." He had an overwhelming desire to bring the same message of hope and comfort to the families of Australian soldiers. So with this in mind, Conan Doyle engaged Carlyle Greenwood Smythe as his agent for a 5-month lecture tour of Australia and New Zealand on spiritualism. Here we go. That's where he went. So we established why he came to Australia. So then we asked ourselves, so what did he do during the Adelaide lecture? So the tour went from the 21st to the 30th of September 1920. So the chronology that follows gives a daily account with one emission, Sunday the 26th of September. On Friday the 13th of August 1920, the Conan Doyle family depart for Australia aboard the RMS Naldera. However, not before a farewell séance, where Kingsley and nephew Oscar gave their blessing for the trip. Accompanying the Conan Doyles were Mary Jakeman, who was Lady Conan Doyle's personal assistant, and Major Alfred Wood, a long-term friend who was employed as Conan Doyle's secretary. The travelling party arrived at Port Adelaide Outer Harbour on the 21st of September. They were greeted by a hospitable letter from the Prime Minister Billy Hughes. Before disembarking, 3 newspaper reporters interviewed Conan Doyle. This, he thought, would provide good publicity for his lecture tour. The travelling party arrived at the Grand Central Hotel, located on the corner of Pulteney and Rundle Streets, as you can see before you on the screen. It was regarded as one of the best in the Commonwealth, boasting many luxuries. The Prince of Wales, Edward VIII, had previously stayed there during his visit only months earlier in July. The only tangible reminder of Conan Doyle's visit is a plaque commemorating his stay. So now where the Grand Central Hotel once stood is Hungry Jack's with a multi-level car park on top. So waiting for Conan Doyle at the hotel was a reporter from the Register. This would be his 4th interview for the day. Later, Conan Doyle met with spiritualists under direction of the spiritual healer Victor Cromer. He described Cromer as a local student of the occult who had considerable psychic power. Now, in Wanderings of a Spiritualist, he talks about going to a winery, but we thought, well, which one? We narrowed it down to a possible 2 wineries at the time, and so that we discovered that the day after their arrival, Sir Arthur and Lady Jean Conan Doyle visited the Penfold wineries at McGill on the 22nd of September. Now, Conan Doyle did describe, however, that the vineyard, its origins, and the process of fermentation. He described the quality of the wines he maintained were purer than the corresponding wines in Europe. And now it took us quite some time to track down the Penfolds Wine Visitors Book just to confirm our suspicion that it was the Penfolds Winery. Penfolds Winery itself, they weren't very forthcoming, but we managed to trace that visitors book in the National Library of Australia in Canberra. It's quite a bit of archival research. Now, a number of the images that will follow are from the actual museum, our museum archives. Motivating factor for visiting Adelaide was to meet the naturalist and conservationist Thomas Payne Bill Chambers. Bill Chambers had established the Humbug Scrub Wildlife Sanctuary in 1905. Now, Conan Doyle had become acquainted with his work through the articles published in Arthur Mee's My Magazine. On Thursday, the 23rd of September, Conan Doyle was delighted when a journalist brought Bill Chambers to his hotel. During their conversation, Conan Doyle wondered whether one who was so near nature might know something of nature's more occult secrets. He felt that Bill Chambers would best be visited on his home ground. In the evening, Conan Doyle dined with local doctors, many of whom had been at the University of Edinburgh during his time. In his publication, Wanderings of a Spiritualist, Conan Doyle specifically mentioned Archibald Watson, who was the elder professor of anatomy at the University of Adelaide. Watson had regaled the dinner party with his Pacific Island adventures on board the blackbirding brig Carl. We also think that Dr. Robert Henry Pullane, William Anstey Giles, Charles William Purves, and William Lennox Cleland may have attended the dinner as well. We managed to track down one of Watson's diaries at the National Library of Australia, and he's as elusive as Jane Austen and Shakespeare. He had a number of his diaries and manuscripts destroyed after his death. It was a condition of his will. So luckily we were able to find one diary. Now, whilst the venue for the dinner remains unknown, it is likely that it was the Adelaide Club. The honorary members book shows that the surgeon Henry Simpson Newland proposed Conan Doyle the day before he arrived in Adelaide. Major Wood was made an honorary member on the 21st of September 1920. Oops. On Friday, the 24th of September, Conan Doyle called on the Adelaide Museum director, Edgar Ravenswood White. Now, Conan Doyle describes him as a capable zoologist, and he mentions that he's in Wanderings of a Spiritualist that he's particularly impressed with Waite when he dived 60 feet in Sydney Harbour and collected a shark's egg. Our research discovered that whilst Waite did don his old diving suit and did dive down 60 feet in Sydney Harbour, he was with a colleague, and it was actually the colleague that had brought up the shark's egg rather than Waite himself. We also have Waite's diaries and correspondence, and some of Waite's recollections of Conan Doyle's visits are really quite interesting. He also then had to get permission from the Board of Governors to attend a trip to Humbug Scrub. Now, during the long-hour visit at the museum, Conan Doyle was particularly interested in the larger echinus, which were on display. He asked many questions regarding their structure, but more on this later. So, whilst on the tour, Conan Doyle visited the Malleefowl exhibit. Bill Chambers, who had been the first to breed malleefowl in captivity, had provided the design of the model and the specimens. Conan Doyle was so impressed with Waite and the museum that he invited him to Humbug Scrub. After the tour of the Adelaide Museum concluded, Conan Doyle visited the art gallery, where he admired Tom Roberts' painting, A Breakaway. Now, that very same day, Conan Doyle lunched at Government House with the Governor Sir William Ernest George Archibald Weagle and his wife. We also know, as you can see on the screen, from the Governor's diaries that he attended one of Conan Doyle's lectures. In the evening of the fourth day, Conan Doyle presented in the Adelaide Town Hall the first of his two-part lecture entitled Death and the Hereafter, the New Revelation Part 1, The Human Argument. The audience numbered approximately 2,000. Now, undoubtedly, the literary fame of Conan Doyle would have been an attraction, as well as a curiosity about spiritualism. The Register reported that Conan Doyle had a clear, well-disciplined voice, excellent diction, a conspicuous sincerity of manner, and no one could have found fault with the way in which Sir Arthur presented his case. On Monday, the 27th of September, Conan Doyle delivered the second part of his lecture, entitled The Religious Argument. Conan Doyle advocated that through spiritualism, the dead could tell us about their own conditions, their present experiences, their outlook upon the secrets of the universe, and the testing of religious truth from the viewpoints of two worlds instead of one. He argued that spiritualism did not conflict with religion, but supported it. At the time of the lectures, there were 5,000 spiritualists in South Australia, and we still have some now. As a prelude to his third lecture, entitled Pictures of Psychic Phenomenon, on Tuesday, the 28th of September, Conan Doyle distinguished between the types of mediums. He then talked about his personal experiences with the Crew Circle Spirit photographers. He showed the photograph up on the screen of himself with a psychoplasmic arch that resembled his deceased son. The audience, including Governor and Lady Weagle, were spellbound, as they had not seen an exhibition of this type previously. On Wednesday, the 29th of September, a party of 11 visited Bellchambers at his home in Humbuck Scrub. Conan Doyle's desire to see the malleefowl in its natural habitat was fulfilled. They observed many species of birds, kangaroos, and possums. One possum climbed onto Conan Doyle's shoulder and then nestled into his pocket, as you can see up on the screen. This photograph and one other of Conan Doyle were found in our archives. This visit left quite an impression on Conan Doyle. He published more than one detailed account in the Adelaide papers. We also have been able to track down this letter, who's owned by one of the members of the Adelaide Sherlock group. The Sherlock Society, sorry. The fourth and final lecture was a repeat of Pictures of Psychic Phenomenon, but with additional new images. The special illustrated matinee was offered to accommodate those who had not been able to secure tickets to the earlier lectures. Watson's diary, as you saw before, recorded his attendance. After the lecture, the travelling party departed by train for Melbourne, continuing the lecture tour. At the end of the 5-month tour, the travelling party returned to Britain. Conan Doyle had presented 25 meetings to an audience of 50,000 people. The lecture tour made £700 after all expenses were paid. He divided the money among spiritual funds in Australia, ensuring that £500 be left to further the message of spiritualism. Though the tour was an overall success, there was an occasional abusive message, such as, "May you be struck dead before you leave the Commonwealth." Clearly, they weren't believers. So, We now know Conan Doyle's movements during the tours, and I'm sure there were many other movements that we have yet to discover. But now you're wondering how fact inspires fiction. We believe that Conan Doyle's visit to Adelaide may have influenced two of his five Professor Challenger stories, The Land of the Mist, published in 1926, and When the World Screamed, published in 1928. Like Sherlock Holmes, Professor Challenger was based on one of Conan Doyle's university professors, as we saw earlier. He is described as self-righteous, without inhibition, and as having the greatest brain in Europe. Unlike Sherlock Holmes, Professor Challenger, the scientist, converts to spiritualism. In Land of the Mist, the spirit of a mad doctor haunts a house owned by Bellchambers. The house is situated on the slope of a low hill, just like the house in Humbug Scrub. In this story, Professor Challenger is critical and intolerant of spiritualism, but agreed to attend a séance as a protection against fraud. He realised that his intolerance had clouded his judgment. The mist cleared when he saw that the séance was genuine and converted. In When the World Screamed, Professor Challenger makes the analogy that the Earth, like the echinus he had seen at the museum, is a living organism and resembles it in both structure and function. In the story, Professor Challenger has the Earth pierced. It shrieks in pain, sending up a geyser into the air. Its cry was heard all over the world and caused volcanoes to erupt. Challenger was celebrated as a genius. So our research is not over, but suffice to say that not all chain of events and results have been deduced, and the mystery continues. I'd just like to finish by saying that the number of people, of the generosity of Doyleans and Sherlockians, and were absolutely phenomenal. And in sharing the story and sharing their images and sharing any bits of knowledge that they had to have. It was a really great experience. And as you can see before you, up there, these are just some of the people that were able to provide us with information and some photographs. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Fran. That was very informative. You and your colleague have done a heap of research to uncover all these clues, and it must have been a real thrill to find those diaries and visitors' books at the Australian National Museum, which would have been a hard search, I'm sure.
Yeah, Wanderings of a Spirit is really quite vague, and it's not always chronological.
Yeah.
And we found that just because he said something, was it true? So, so we managed to sort of, and we wanted definitely chronology. We wanted to know what happened each day, but tracing things down was interesting, yes.
As you mentioned one of your days you know nothing about, the Sunday the 26th of September. Is there any more detail come to light yet on that one?
No. It was about a year after I did the exhibition, I think, that we curated the exhibition, that I found out about the shark's egg. That took a bit of hunting down.
Okay.
I have a little victory dance that I do when I actually find something. So it's really at work. It's really quite funny. But there we go. No, we haven't done any more work on this one.
I was wondered, in your research, did you find the Adelaide press reports sympathetic to Conan Doyle and his spiritualism, or was there a bit of criticism? I know he copped a bit of flack here in Sydney from some of the newspapers.
Oh, no, he did. So the majority, I think, were just because I don't think they'd ever seen anything quite like it. Even though I think the spiritualists, they were quite prominent. There were 5,000 in South Australia, but I think they were more dominant in Sydney and Melbourne, maybe. But no, a lot of it was actually Conan Doyle writing for the paper as well about what he did. I mean, like the trip to Humbug Scrub, there were quite a few that he wrote, and he advocated too for converting Humbug Scrub and being recognised by the government into a park. But he was quite a conservationist as well, I think, Conan Doyle.
He was indeed, yes, very attuned to nature.
And fairies, and I think that was part of the lure of Bellchambers too, that he thought he might know something more of the occult and fairies. But mostly it was, I think, just an account of what he said and did. But there were some criticisms, but I think it was more the newspaper articles were more about what they actually saw.
Okay, sure. Was there also any evidence that interest in spiritualism had a bit of a surge after he left, or was the membership increased for the local societies?
I don't know the answer to that. I
Yeah.
imagine he would have done, because I mean he did leave that was it the £500 to
Yes.
promote it. So, but I haven't followed that one up, so I can't tell you. But I imagine it would have had some effect. I mean, people that would never have attended a spiritualist meeting or a presentation attended. So, and this was not soon after, not long after World War One had concluded, and people were supposed looking for answers and to what happened to people after they died. And I think spiritualism might have brought comfort. So I don't know. I would imagine there might have been, because I
Right.
think, yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll open the floor up now. Anybody else got some questions for Fran on a fantastic presentation? Just unmute yourself if you want to ask a question, and you can pick her brains as much time as she can give us. Keith, yes, you got your hand up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Fran. That was a great presentation. And it is interesting how spiritualism generated so much controversy. I've been involved with the Helen Duncan matter. So Helen Duncan in 1941 told a woman that her husband had died on the ship, the HMS Byron. And at the time, the British government had made no announcement of the sinking of that ship. And eventually Helen Byron was arrested under the Witchcraft Act and imprisoned so that she wouldn't release any of the details of the invasion of Europe in D-Day in June 1944, 3 years later. So I find it fascinating. I'm not a spiritualist, but I do find it fascinating that someone like Helen Duncan should be the last person arrested under the Witchcraft Act for revealing information that the government thought it had kept hidden. So it's still a mystery, and poor old Helen Duncan, some of us are trying to get her posthumously pardoned by the Home Secretary. But it's interesting how Conan Doyle was tapping into something which was very much top of mind at that time, even if it's disappeared somewhat from public view at the moment.
That's right too. I often I'd read about that. I think I'd like to help you if I can get that poor woman exonerated. But I often wonder whether Lady Conan Doyle was actually just went along with spiritualism because of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, or whether she actually believed it. I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to the question. I don't know if anybody else does.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I know that Georgina Doyle, she was married to Conan Doyle's brother Innes's son. So she'd be a niece by marriage. She wrote that tell-all about Conan Doyle and tried to say that he wasn't a good father to Marion Kingsley after he'd married his second wife, but I don't know.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else got any questions for Fran? Stuart?
Yeah. Just following up from Bill's question there about was there an upsurge of spiritualism after Conan Doyle? His book, if I got it right, The Wanderings of a Spiritualist. How did that sell then in Australia in the 1920s?
Oh, I have no idea. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I've read it, but I don't know.
You don't know the sales.
Sorry?
You don't know the sales numbers.
No, absolutely not. No.
All right.
That would be really interesting.
Yeah. They'd tell us, wouldn't it? They'd tell us where there was a real interest on.
Yeah. As I thought I alluded to before, I think people would have been attracted to what he had to say. A lot of them would have read his books. And so they would have been attracted, they knew him as this author, but they would have probably been intrigued to hear what he had to say about spiritualism. So I would think that it would have, but I don't know the answer.
Okay. Interesting question. I might just do some research on ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. There's so many unanswered questions that I have. So there we go.
All right. Well, thank you, Fran. Is anybody else anything else from Fran? We might let her go. We can just continue on with our normal meeting topics. So thank you very much, Fran. I'll be in touch by email to let you know how it went.
Okay. Look, thank you. Thank you for your patience again.
Thank you very much. Your
Thank
time
you.
this weekend.
Thank you.
Okay,
You
now.
too. Bye-bye.
Well, hello everybody. It's a bit of a back-to-back. I mean, topsy-turvy meeting this time. We had to do with a presentation first, owing to the communication problems we're having with Fran and the Zoom connection. But I'd like to welcome everybody to the meeting, especially those people joining us at unfriendly hours, and those people joining their first online meeting. Welcome to you all. We are recording this meeting, so if anybody does not want to be recorded, let me know, and we'll try and edit you out. Otherwise, we'll put up on YouTube as normal. In my captain's message in the last passenger's log, I asked local passengers to let me know their preferences regarding in-person meetings as opposed to online meetings. We're still toying with the format of our meetings, and we not too sure how in-person meetings will be received, but we've had actually 2 in-person meetings since the end of the pandemic restrictions, and they weren't very well attended, so maybe online meetings are the way to go from now on. But it would be nice to get feelings of passengers what they think about both of those meeting formats, and let me know so we can sort of plan for the future a bit better. Online meetings, of course, are very easy, but not for everybody, because not everybody has got internet. So some of those members who would like to join us can't, because they don't have the technology available to them. But so we've also put up a poll on our members only Facebook group. It's the same sort of question. So thank you to those people who have responded so far. So if you want to get into that and leave us your thoughts and your opinions there, well, that would be very helpful as well. There's been a bit of media news at the moment. There are 2 new TV series in the offing. One called Sherlock and Daughter. It's a new American TV series scheduled to launch in September. The premise is that a young American woman is seeking answers for her mother's mysterious death, travels to England to get Holmes' help, as she believes that he is her father. Bit of a shock for Sherlock, I'm sure, when she picked up on his doorstep. But Holmes is played by the English actor David Thewlis, and the cast list so far includes Professor Moriarty, but it appears that there's no Dr. Watson, so we'll see how that one turns out. It's a TV series starting in November in the US. There's also another TV series called Watson. It's underway in the US as well. It's set 1 year after Reichenbach, and that's Dr. Watson resumes his medical career at a clinic treating rare diseases. The only cast member mentioned so far in that is Black American actor Morris Chestnut. So that'll be a bit of a new one to keep our eye on as well. There's also many rumours, of course, about the third Enola Holmes movie from Netflix. But that, as far as the Netflix is concerned, it remains in development, whatever that means. So until we get some sort of formal confirmation from Netflix, what they may do with all the gossip and speculation that comes up every now and again. We also like to look at these meetings is what anniversaries occur around these dates, so we can sort of attune ourselves to what was going on in the canon around this time of the year. On the 22nd of April was Conan Doyle's birthday, born in 1859, as Fran mentioned in the presentation. On the 23rd of April, 1895, the adventure of the solitary cyclist commenced. On the 24th of April, 1891, Holmes visited Dr. Watson in his consulting room to ask him to come away for a trip to the continent for a week, a case that Dr. Watson subsequently recorded as a final problem. On the 27th of April, 1890, a notice appeared in the Morning Chronicle newspaper advising that there was a new vacancy for the Red-Headed League, which caused Jabez Wilson to come around to consult Holmes and see what he should do to attend that, take that vacancy or not. So there are some of the canonical dates that are occurring around this time of the year, which give us a bit of concept of what was going on. Has anybody got any show and tell? You always got something new to show us. So perhaps any new books or DVDs or video presentations that people might got hold of. Anything to show us? Nothing from Louis. That's unusual. All right. Well, we pretty much reached the end of the presentation. Has anybody's got any news or tidbits of gossip to let us in on? We've as we say, we're still toying with the presentation for our meetings for this year. So we're good to let local members let me know what your preferences are, either for in-person meetings or online. Stuart, you got something to say? Yeah.
Yeah. Look, the Australian this week, in an article, said that the Conan Doyle estate has authorised Gareth Rubin, is a thriller writer, it's going to be published in, I think it's September, a new Conan Doyle endorsed estate, Holmes and Moriarty, take on from Anthony Horowitz. And they also said that the estate would like authors to develop more books on Colonel Sebastian Moran, which would be a good idea, because really there's only been two really on him. Donald Thomas and Kim Newman are the only ones who really have done that. I was at Elizabeth's bookshop out at Newtown the other day, and I was able to get it. I've heard Doug Elliott say that these are fine stories. I finally found it. It was the exploits of Sherlock Holmes, the Adrian Conan Doyle and the John Dickinson Carr volume, which is for $9.90, and it's published by Spear in 1978. So it's a good copy for that. So that was so I was pleased with getting that.
Good. That's not off your library. Okay. Anybody else got anything to tell us? Otherwise, we'll
yeah, Bill, did you just want to mention that we're still doing our shortlist for Montpellier Awards?
Yeah. The Montpellier Award, which is our annual award for the best bits of research presented. I've been dragging the chain a bit on getting this ready for send out to you, Bill, but we're finalising the shortlist at the moment, and we'll be coming out in the mail or on my email to you next week to vote on your preference for the best bit of research article, so we can announce it later on in the year. So apologies for my tardiness, but it's coming out soon. Well, thank you all. Thank you for your attendance. It's been a bit of a mixed up meeting, but I think we've all enjoyed the presentation from Fran. She's done a hell of a lot of work in getting that prepared. And as you say, it's an ongoing project for her, which is great. So they can hopefully fill in some of the blanks as time goes on. But it just shows you what museum researchers can do when they put their mind to it, digging up stuff from all over the place, which is great to see. So thank you all for your attendance. It's been a great meeting. Good to see you all online. It's been a while since our last meeting. This will be going up on YouTube eventually. I'll let you all know when it's ready to view. So thank you all, and see you next time. Bye for now.